Welcome to This Explainer. If you're out there trying to figure out how to build a stateless society, an autonomous zone, or a true commune from the ground up, you've absolutely got to study Auroville. This isn't just some abstract theory. It's a living, breathing, 50-year sociological experiment in human unity, ecology, and totally decentralized living.
All right, let's dive right into this. Back in 1954, Mira Alfassa, who was known as the Mother, laid out a radical vision that's going to resonate instantly with anyone aiming to dismantle borders. She pictured a place that literally no nation could claim as its own sole property. A place where people could just live freely as citizens of the world, driven by harmony rather than constant competition.
And you know what? They actually built the thing. And I really want to highlight the sheer scale here, because we're not talking about a tiny backyard project with a dozen of your friends. Today, Auroville is home to roughly 3,500 residents representing over 60 different nationalities. It's this massive, real-world blueprint for existing cooperatively, completely outside the traditional boundaries of the nation-state.
So, here's how we're going to deconstruct this massive experiment today. First, we'll look at their vision beyond nations. Then we'll check out the prosperity economic model, their ecological transformation, the architecture of time, and finally, what happens when decentralized governance comes under siege, wrapping up with some hard lessons for our own autonomous communities.
All right, part one, a vision beyond nations and designing a stateless society. Nothing captures this project's foundational rejection of borders quite like their kickoff back in 1968. Picture this. During the inauguration, soil from 124 different nations, plus all the Indian states, was tossed together and mixed into a single central urn. It was this powerful, incredibly physical commitment to building a universal township entirely beyond race, religion, or nationality. Moving on to part two, the prosperity economic model and going beyond capitalism.
So here's where it gets really interesting for us. Consider the stark contrast between standard traditional economics and what Auroville actually does. Capitalism? That's just a huge engine of production driven by cutthroat competition. But Auroville operates on what they call a prosperity system. The entire goal is universal basic services. They provide the minimum needs for everyone, meaning work isn't this crushing grind just to survive. Instead, it's about the joy of work as self-expression, leaving you with free leisure time to actually, grow as a person. But how do you actually fund that in the real world? Well, the mechanics look like this. To keep this prosperity system afloat, they rely on 38 trusts and over 320 units functioning as social enterprises. We're talking everything from manufacturing to essential services. It creates this incredibly robust local economy that provides jobs and skills to over 3,000 workers from the surrounding bioregion. It's just a totally decentralized network of co-ops sustaining the whole community.
Okay, part three, ecological transformation, or how they healed the land.
You've absolutely got to see the transformation here. Back in 1968, the land they started with was basically a barren, totally eroded wasteland, just dirt. And today, it's completely transformed into a lush, thriving forest. Through sheer, sustained collective effort, these folks planted over 3 million trees and set up serious watershed management. For anyone trying to build an eco-village, this is rock-solid proof that massive, unbelievable ecological repair is 100% possible.
Part four, the architecture of time, focusing on the Matramandar.
This structure is the very heart of Auroville. And notice the design. It's a flattened sphere. There's literally no hierarchy here, no privileged viewpoint up at the top looking down. It's not a religious temple either. It's purely a communal space meant for individual concentration and inner stillness. The geometry has no front or back, which completely embodies their core philosophy of total equality.
And get this, the actual building process was a complete masterclass in anti-capitalism. The Matrimandir took nearly 4 decades to build. No commercial urgency whatsoever, zero market-driven deadlines. Time, along with collective, voluntary effort, were the actual building materials. They just let the project evolve organically, proving you can create awe-inspiring infrastructure without the relentless, crushing speed of modern commercial development.
Which brings us to part 5, decentralized governance under siege and a vision tested.
Now, this brings up absolutely the most critical question for any anarchist or commune builder. What exactly happens when your completely decentralized project faces the full weight of centralized, state-appointed intervention? Because right now, Auroville's entire stateless dream is being severely tested by administrative and political pressure.
To wrap our heads around this crisis, we have to look at two totally opposing structures clashing. On one side, you have the Residents' Assembly. That's the organic, decentralized, consensus-driven body made up of the actual residents. On the exact opposite side, you have the Governing Board. This is a centralized, unilateral entity directly appointed by the government of India.
Now, for decades, that Residents' Assembly was how the community managed everything. Town planning, who gets admitted, the finances, you name it. These massive organic gatherings fostered deep communal ownership. And yeah, sure, democratic consensus can be frustratingly slow, but it was incredibly collective. However, sources report that this grassroots democratic process is currently being systematically bypassed and ignored by those external appointees.
According to the documentation, this centralized takeover is utilizing some very specific tactics. And honestly, this serves as a stark warning blueprint for all of us about the vulnerabilities of autonomous zones. The reports cite opaque land exchanges that lose the community real estate and cuts to resident stipends that effectively choke out their financial support. There are top-down controls on who is allowed to join or get expelled. They've even reportedly seized main email servers to censor free expression. Plus, there are plans floating around to just outsource healthcare and pave the way for commercial spiritual tourism. Finally, Part 6. Lessons for Autonomous Communities, the Blueprint and the Warnings.
Tracing the timeline here is super revealing. It all started in 1968 as a pure, stateless ideal. Fast forward to 1988, and the Auroville Foundation Act was passed. Basically, they integrated the commune under an Indian state framework, thinking it would protect their assets. Well, jump to 2021, and we see an accelerated top-down takeover. It's a huge lesson. Legally codifying your autonomous project under state law, even with the absolute best intentions, can easily become the Trojan horse for state overreach decades down the line.
Because the reality is this. Auroville proves you can build the most beautiful ecological systems, the most robust cooperative economies, but it can all crumble if your governance structure can't actually fend off authoritarianism. As the Global Eco-Village Network points out, if an experiment this unique and established is vulnerable to external state pressure, it shows just how fragile these types of intentional communities really are.
So as you take inspiration from Auroville's incredible prosperity model, their massive reforestation, and their radical dedication to collective labor, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. When you're out there building your own stateless society, how exactly are you going to design its governance to defend against external authoritarianism? Something to chew on. Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and keep building.